Coming to you live from DB Audio Studios in Windhoek, this is the 𝗢𝗃𝗿𝗃𝗃𝗃 Agriculture Series. Good morning, viewers, and welcome to the third session of the four-part live series on innovation and trends that will shape the future of agriculture. My name is 𝗘𝗰𝗿𝗂𝗶𝗰𝗂𝗋, and I'm your moderator for this series. Yesterday, we looked at succeeding with sustainable irrigation solutions with Isabel van der Stoep, who joined us live from South Africa. If you have missed these sessions, you can visit 𝗢𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 YouTube Live. They are available. For the afternoon session, we had Adrian Pierce, who spoke on the prospect for the establishment of viable aquaponic businesses in Namibia, and he joined live from Zambia. Due to connectivity issues, unfortunately, we could not air the full session. Please keep a lookout on the 𝗢𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃 YouTube channel for the notification on when this session will be aired again. This morning, I'm joined in studio by Mr. Salomo Mbai, who will be speaking on the Agriculture Economic Overview Megatrends. Salomo Mbai is an agribusiness management specialist with over 23 years of experience in the Namibian agricultural domain. He was the head of the Department of Agriculture and Natural Resource Science at Namibia University of Science and Technology from 2009 to 2019. He is currently the director of the Agriculture Trade Policy Institute from June 2020 to date. His research work focused on agricultural marketing policy and trade analysis. He was part of the consulting consortiums that research on goat and venison marketing, meat export diversification, competitive analysis of the Namibian meat industry, and linking emerging livestock farmers to markets for the Meat Board of Namibia and the Namibia National Farmers Union, respectively. Solomon is also a part-time cattle farmer for more than 20 years. Welcome, Solomon.
Good morning, and very warm welcome to the online viewers as well.
To our viewers, I would like to remind you that should you have any questions related to the topic being discussed, please do post these on the YouTube or Facebook channel. Solomon will answer your question after his presentation. Now, Solomon, megatrends in agriculture influence the way the world produces, distributes, and of course sell and consume food. From an economic perspective, what are the current megatrends in agriculture that we are seeing, particularly during this time that we find ourselves in? What are the opportunities which we can see, and how can Namibia position itself in a direction that can actually be much more sustainable when it comes to agriculture growth? Please, I hand over to you. You can take us through your presentation.
Thank you, Maria, once again. First of all, Maria, before I attempt to answer those questions that you posed, I would first of all like to give an insight about what these megatrends are. So the megatrends are a trajectory of change that will have profound implications across many areas of industry or society. Each megatrend, of course, occurs at the intersection of multiple sites, and they are mainly influenced by patterns that includes, among others, geopolitical forces, economic forces, environmental and social and technology trends. And what's the importance of presenting these megatrends? Is of course to provide insights to help individuals, enterprises, sectors and government to explore and be better prepared for uncertain future economic conditions, including making choices and developing strategies upfront that are tailored to their specific context and objectives, and also to harness emerging trends and opportunities while managing key uncertainties and risks. First of all, I think, Maria, it's important that I look at the specific trends. The very first one, of course, is the growth in the global population, leading to the number of pressures that is put on economies, as well as towns, especially if you take it in the Namibian context. You have a rural to urban migration, and as a result of that, there's significant pressure that is put on infrastructure, your road infrastructure, as well as some other resources, like the limited water as well. Now, as a result of that, the empowered consumers will, of course, shape the markets for the future in terms of their demands for specific products of specific qualities and so on. And they will demand high quality food. And also the consumer attitudes and expectations will continue to evolve. I think you have a lot of people now moving towards more green products with less chemicals. If you look at the Southern African perspective, Sub-Saharan Africa, that's what I talked about. By 2050, the projection is that the population will be in excess of 80 million. And of course, the movement of people there, again, from the rural to the urban centers, it's of course very important to highlight. Just a continuation in terms of urbanization. The trend is that there will be more people that will be located in the cities and in towns as well. To look at a continuation. What are the implications of this growth for the agricultural sector? So the global demand for protein will continue to grow, including plant-based proteins. Namibia livestock and beef sector will have to target, or it will have to be very specific in terms of reducing the impacts on the environment as well. And also farmers and other value chain actors will have to comply with the strict consumer expectations. Long-term increase in the volume and diversity of global trade will have an increase in biosecurity issues. Consumers will demand the consumer demand and market access will depend on Namibia's reputations in terms of food safety, aspects of food safety, food quality, and so on. And then, of course, let's look at mega trend number 2, the fractional politics. I think here we have to talk about the dance of the titans, what is happening in the big economies, the demand or the deep shift in economic and military and cultural power, and its subsequent impact on the overall economic performance in different countries. International trade and relations, along with food and fiber markets supply, will be heavily impacted. And as a result of that, there's most of the leading countries, they would like to move forward with addressing and pursuing their specific interests. There will be some elements of price volatility and uncertainty, as well as complexity and ambiguity. And now, to address that, there's a need for an improved synergy and collaborations. And as a result of that, the issues of trust and cooperation between different role players is of essence. Let's look at the permanent race for advantage. The permanent race for advantage in terms of aspects of competitiveness, aspects of market share. It's of course some of those leading and important aspects that one needs to take into account. Relentless innovation drives improved productivity, of course, in terms of the use of technology, and also the need for coming up with better and safe products. In the end, one should strike a balance between profitability, right, in innovative ways, while taking into account the aspects of environmental protection. The benefits of innovation will not only be shared evenly, often exacerbating existing pressures on rural industries and developing regional economies. Improved productivity may also, to some extent, benefit consumers through lower prices. The rural populations will drift from rural areas to major cities and towns. In terms of support to the different role players, going forward, there will be a significant reduction in support in supporting different value chain actors. As a result, the most competitive, the most efficient role players, will be able to maintain their market share and position. Now, what are the implications of this permanent race for advantage to the agricultural sectors? Farm management practices, technology, regional infrastructure, and wider economic policy settings are important to improve agricultural performance. So a combination of all those aspects with modern farming techniques, aspects pertaining to precision farmings. You know, those are important elements that will be on the forefront to ensure a reduction in cost and also to improve the overall performance of the sector. Productivity gains will be required to maintain competitiveness at a micro level and a macro level as well. Maintaining and improving access to high-value markets and consumers will require governments, and our government and industry, to ensure management practices keep pace with consumer or customer expectations. Productivity growth and the race for advantage will benefit consumers as well as the different producers and the different role players. Cascading planetary risk, that's the fourth mega trend that I'm looking at. Accelerated changes in Earth systems at all scales, from global to microbial, are creating multiple risks and challenges, and also to some extent there are also some opportunities that emanate from this specific mega trend. Agriculture, as you know, is already impacted, and there are some elements of adoption to that. Of course, the issues of climate change and commodity prices will become more volatile, while emerging markets and ecosystems survive to transform landscapes and the different business models. A continuation of this mega trend. Science suggests major challenges ahead. Interactions and feedbacks often amplify risks and raising pressures on natural ecosystems. I think we've experienced over the past few years drought, and the impact of drought was in fact severe on the livestock sector as a whole, as well as on the overall social profitability. Reducing net emissions and protecting natural assets could actually benefit farmers on the long run. And natural environment stewardship could also offer substantial opportunities for landowners, regional communities, for regional jobs, incomes, and economic benefits. Biodiversity and ecosystem resilience. All these components needs to be properly synchronized. So what are the implications of these cascading planetary risks? There's an importance to maintaining access to premium markets, and that will require approaches that balanced out profitable farming, as well as clean and environmental consideration, whereby the environmental assets are properly protected. Drought, as I've mentioned, and floods are likely to be more disruptive and severe, and regional commodity prices and market access may become even more volatile, I think, going forward. Trends towards hotter and drier conditions will impact profitability and will drive changes in farm practices. Climate and emissions reduction policies are likely to be more stringent going forward. Now, let's look at the disruptive technology. As you know, Maria, the technological and to the viewers, technological development. Of course, there are opportunities, especially for the brave. What are the different technological opportunities that exist? For instance, that will enable us as a country, Namibia in particular, to move away from certain traditional practices. You've seen there's a big increase in online marketing activities, and also other different platforms that are used basically to communicate and provide real-time data to the different role players. So as a result of that, production systems and customer needs will then need proper coordination and closer synergies and collaboration in order for the different producers to be able to make use of the opportunities that emanate out of the new advancements in the technological innovation that leads to processing and also provide different types of products that addresses the needs of the consumers. Now, the disruptive technologies, the opportunities that it provides, the information-rich production systems will provide new levels of control and accountability. Revolutionary connectivity will enable new types and levels of customer engagement. That's what we talk about, like aspects of online auctions, as well as aspects pertaining to precision farming. Unlocking these opportunities will require new data sharing and governance. And the key factors in data sharing, of course, is first of all to ensure that there are clear data arrangements that is accessible to both the consumers and the producers. There are common data standards, common linking keys and data management and standards that I've mentioned. And of course, it's again also very important for the consumers and the producers basically to have the two-way flow of data and communication. The disruptive technologies and opportunities for the brave. So what are the implications of these or of these mega trends for the agricultural sector? As you know that well-informed decisions or decision-making and risks will be, of course, key. Integrated and interconnected systems will provide new options for managing volatility and uncertainties along the value chains. Effective use of data will shape the access to capital, including new forms of investments and risk-sharing avenues. Realizing the full benefits of disruptive technology will require new paradigms to data and information management. The very last one that I'm looking at is the ability of the different nations, and in particular Namibia. Are we going to surf or are we going to sink in relation to all these new developments or the mega trends that I talked about? Position and momentum are crucial to serving the waves of change. Business, governments and communities all have crucial roles. More coordinated synergies are needed to ensure sustainability. And of course, as you know, that prediction is difficult, especially the future. But the future, to some extent, is also certain in its making. Just briefly, I would like to look at the contribution of the sector, the agricultural sector. As you are seeing on this specific presentation, there's a downward trend. As we look at from the 1980s, where it was slightly above or close to 10, right? And the current contribution, which is hovering around 6% to the GDP. Maria, I think I will end it there for now. And I'm open to take up some questions and inputs.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Solomon, for that insightful presentation. Very interesting indeed, looking at those mega trends. And really, as a country, you know, we cannot be in our own corner because, I mean, there's always this saying that we are an open economy. We have international obligations. And as much as I think a lot of discussion around Namibia being a small economy vis-a-vis economies of scale, we are struggling to compete in the world market. But maybe let me start with, you know, especially the rural areas. You have mentioned, you touched on urbanization and the shift away people from probably rural areas, which is also traditionally the place where we produce food, especially at household level. How do we fuse innovation in rural agriculture, where we are really seeing less adoption of that and allowing people to shift from traditional way of farming?
Yes, thank you. It's an interesting question indeed. One way of doing it is, of course, to ensure that there's an upscale in skills of the different rural actors or the rural farmers, and also to ensure that there's ample support in terms of information flow and at a very high speed. Yeah. In addition to that, of course, if the rural economies are not functioning properly, right, you will have the movement of people, basically because of a lack of employment opportunities and so on. So it's a joint effort from all the different stakeholders, and not only government, to ensure that from the private sector side, we bring all these different actors together and ensure that there are proper policies that are put in place, especially aspects pertaining to the decentralization policy, for instance.
Definitely.
Right, to ensure that people are not necessarily that you keep them within the rural area, but you ensure that you create, enough incentives for them to farm, enough incentives for them to be able to remain in the rural areas. For instance, the issue of access to telecommunication network, right? Access to other, resources that is needed to drive the economies forward. And of course, it's also important to look at the success stories of other countries and how they did it and how they managed, for instance, to be able to ensure that the rural economies are kept alive. I think we have more than enough examples, for instance, for us to move from traditional, farming practices to more modern and innovative ways of doing business. Yeah,
no, very interesting indeed. And when you mentioned that we should probably tap more into other learnings, the second question is really on the drought that really links to climate change as a bigger topic, right? And I'm wondering, really, do we have any learning similar to a country that exists like Namibia? Namibia is a very unique country in itself, looking at the climatic condition, but also looking at the resource abundance that we have at the end of the day. And we seem not to really harness that much of what we have. And that is the second question in terms of really the climate change issue and how we can really shift. Of course, it links to the innovation, to flow of information, to looking at driving in the skills. But I'm wondering on the mega trend issue, and you really mentioned also that it's becoming even probably stricter, like rules in carbon emissions, which we're really also seeing as a bigger trend in the world, where probably the West will be giving us more stricter way to produce. And in fact, I read an article, an interesting one, which says we could actually create a niche market access into the European market, which is really linked to, less emission production, going really clean. Do you see us really coming together and turning around this climate change issue in terms of our production system along the value chain, really?
Yes, I always remain hopeful, provided that we have certain elements or certain systems and processes in place. I think of importance is the ability to deal with the occurrence of drought, and the ability for us to be prepared to be able to deal with the specific or prolonged periods of droughts. Now, having said that, of course, the past couple of years gave us an indication that, and we're also aware of the fact that Namibia is predominantly a dry country, right? But with the current technologies that are available, for instance, one will be able to effectively utilize the scarce natural resources. I take note of the presentation yesterday to be able to utilize water properly. But again, I think the aspect of dealing with drought, it's actually affected, it's a component that needs to be carefully looked at. We have to honestly look at the current systems or the government institutions that are in place. Like for instance, the drought policy, right? Is it giving us enough signals before, for instance, before the outbreak of any drought? How do we manage, how prepared are we before drought? Do we have systems in place, for instance, from the local farmer level, as well as the contributions from the macro level as well from the government side? And of course, it doesn't end there. How do you deal with drought when you're in the middle of drought, right? Do we have enough reserves, right? And how best can we handle drought after, an extended period of drought? As you've seen, the livestock numbers, the reduction in livestock numbers. How do we ensure that, for instance, we allow enough, or we get enough breeding material for us to produce enough, let's say, beef to be able to retain, our current markets, our current lucrative markets.
Exactly.
Of course, with the use of technology and a combination of the use of technology, aspects of preparedness, maybe there's a strong need, for us to look at like a system of funding, for instance, like a drought fund that can be used, to manage and help drought as well as the other aspects of, mitigating and sharing of information.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the Agriculture Trade Policy Institute, one of its firsts in the country, looking at other countries they already have, especially if you look at neighboring countries, Botswana, South Africa, they for a while had such institute that support is from an academia research point of view into the industry and both government. And very interesting on your slide on the data, especially the data science aspect of it, collection of data, heavy access of data, sharing of data. How do you see, how is the ATPI as an institution in this space supporting and really working, linking it to the whole value chain when it comes to evidence-based research and analysis in the country to sort of course, shape this perspective, broader perspective going forward?
Thank you, Maria, once again for that interesting question. I think the issue of data, it's an interesting one. Of course, you have some degrees of confidentiality of some of the data, that some of the institutions will use it as their trade secret. And there's a need for instance, from our side, basically to try and get access to this data and uncode it in a way that is usable by all the different role players along the value chain. The one important consideration or an important situation is the fact that the more data is available to all the role players, from production, the input processing, as well as traders, the better the different role players will perform, or the different value chain actors will perform. And in the end, that will ensure that better products are produced, and we are able to supply products that are basically addressing or satisfying the needs of the consumers. It's a mammoth task, of course. One take that one into account, but it's very small steps that we have to take to ensure that we have data that is readily available when, be it investors, when the investors are looking for this data, or the different, for instance, producers that would like to maybe venture into specific aspects of agribusiness management.
Now, this is probably last second question, and your last slide you highlighted on the contribution of the agriculture sector to the GDP, which really has been declining as opposed to it being, going up. But of course, when you look at the consumption patterns, they are going up. import figures are up. We do have, specific interventions in the sector, like the horticulture sector, where you see the increase in the local production, but it does not necessarily mean that the imports are coming down. In fact, they are going up. So, in terms of really looking at the contribution, and Namibia being an agricultural, we say, is the backbone of the economy. And I know that in the current times where we find ourselves during the COVID-19 crisis, food security is becoming more and more important. We saw how the borders literally shut down when we went for the first lockdown. And as a country really relying on, as a net importer of food, where do we see ourselves, and when do we see ourselves sustainable? Can we one day achieve food security, or is a matter of you can never really have everything yourself, hence you opening up your market? How do you do that balance? And I think also looking at the fact that Namibia's most probably best approach, from our opinion, when we look at this input substitution approach that we use to drive agriculture production vis-a-vis international obligations and the openness of the world. One of your interesting topics, you said, look, those that will remain competitive will maintain their market share. Perhaps within that conversation, how do you see really us moving forward and crafting our own narrative in terms of niche market, food production for security-wise?
Yes, Maria, once again, an interesting question. But of course, in order for us to up our game in terms of local production, certain factors needs to be taken into account. For instance, from the current production, you know that there's a high cost, that is associated with local production. And how best can we deal with this high cost in terms of trying to reduce it? If you look at the crop side of things, for instance, we are literally importing everything, right? From the seeds to the fertilizers and other production inputs. And it's important that as a country, we have to tactically look at the most viable ways of production, the most viable ways in terms of determining the gross margins, right, in producing certain products. It will be indeed disadvantageous, for instance, if you produce a product at a very high cost. And you know that the high cost of production, you then shift that cost to the consumers. And that's where now you will see one needs to strike a proper balance between what you are importing and what you are exporting. And of course, as a country, it's important that we looked at avenues of more investment in the agricultural sector. There are some trends of growth in investment to ensure that the local farmers, the small-scale farmers that are currently contributing to the production, are upscaled. They are given more support to move forward. But in the absence, I think one of the key challenging issues in our economy, of course, is the data, the access to data. What are the pockets of opportunities, for instance, whereby we can provide this data in the most effective manner to the different role players? Of course, if you look at some other economies, right, most of our bigger agribusinesses, right, they're operating in the small economy. In our Namibian economies, even the small size of the population and so on. Perhaps we have to look at foreign direct investment. What are the opportunities in terms of us as a country to look at possibilities of investing in other facilities, like for instance in the beef sector? Nothing is stopping us from investing in the feedlots in South Africa. for instance, it's an opportunity.
Definitely.
And it's something that can be explored as well.
Yeah.
We are very fortunate as a country in terms of our geographic location. The proximity to the Angolan market,
Yeah.
of course, it's a bigger market in terms of the population. And the livestock from the northern communal areas, for instance,
Yeah.
right, can be exported if possible, whereby Namibian businesses through foreign direct investments can utilize these livestock. Basically, if you look at cattle, to slaughter the cattle, for instance, these winners grow them in Angola,
Yeah.
as an example, slaughter them there, and then be able to market them in the Angolan market or even the DRC market. So the pockets of opportunities are endless.
Yeah.
But the bigger picture is that instead of us looking inward,
Yeah.
we have to look at how best we can go outside the scope of our economy.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think to add on that, interesting sector you could probably have alluded to is the goat market. I always find it very interesting that we have such a demand of export of goats, but perhaps we are always so covered by the fact that we need to export everything processed. Because I think for a while, why we didn't have goat meat on the shelf is because the farmer gets a higher price when they export it live over the border as opposed to the price you get per cut. And I think those are some of the pocket of opportunities as you mentioned. Now coming back to still the data issue and the different markets, and very interesting, the informal market. It is becoming now a bit more debated in meetings, in conference about what is happening in the informal market. We are seeing a shift of, let's say, livestock decline within the throughput in the formal marketing channels, particularly probably at the export abattoir level. However, the demand within the informal market, we are seeing a shift of that, but we don't really hear data much, what is happening, what number. Have you experienced, and do you see a shift probably from as a farmer, more as a farmer now than as a director at ATPI? How can we incorporate the informal market, which is growing really, into the formalization of understanding it from a data point of view?
Yes. You see, the informal market has its own dynamics. And of course, the mere fact that it's informal, right, at the macro level,
Yeah.
you have very limited access to, again, the data. Right? So, and in addition to that, of course, if it's informal, there's very limited ways of doing some tax collection.
Should we formalize it?
It should indeed be formalized, right, so that we get to know what is happening. Because if it remains informal, right, we will not be able to participate actively in the global markets, yeah. And we will not be able to respond to current developments and trends. However, I must indicate that, if you look at the cattle prices or beef prices, for instance, in the informal market, the returns that you are getting in the informal market for an ox, yeah, or a steer and so on, it's a little bit much higher. But it must be formalized. We need to find some pockets of opportunity once again, how best we can formalize these specific markets, ensure that we advance the quality of the products being produced, and also to comply to health and safety issues.
Definitely, definitely. Mr. Salomo 𝗏𝗏, thank you so much for this interesting, insightful discussion. I just want to give you a floor one last time, maybe just your last message to everybody watching, to the farmers out there, and to anybody who wants to get into the agriculture sector in terms of participating commercially.
Yeah, just as a parting shot, the agricultural sector, as you know, that will remain a key sector to the Namibian economy. Indeed, in order for us to move it forward, there's an urgent need, and I must say very urgent, yeah, for us to closely collaborate, yeah, right, and ensure that we all operate as a team, from the academia to the private sector, as well as government. I think I will leave it there for now.
Definitely. Thank you, Mr. Solomon.
Thank you.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our third session of the Bank Windhoek Agriculture Series. Come catch me live this afternoon. I'll be joined in studio by James 𝗘𝗿𝗿. He's the economic advisor to the president, and 𝗘𝗰𝗿𝗿𝗂𝗿𝗃𝗵𝗄 from Bank Windhoek. They will be talking on public-private partnership, unpacking the Harambee Prosperity Plan, looking at the green economy and how we can forge sustainable partnership. Until this afternoon, from me, Marie Emmanuel, thank you very much and goodbye.